what it means that a child is abused. And we're going to think about what it looks like, how we run our programs in a way that protects children. And we do that to ensure that they're kept safe, because we remember that these little ones, they're the image bearers of God. That's what we read in Genesis chapter 1. We read that these little ones are put in our care, they're very addicted to God, and they're that's what makes them different from the rest of creation. And that's why we've got to handle them very carefully. That's why we've got to shoot them up. That's why we've got to shoot them there. So I'm going to begin today with this word safeguarding. And to explain it probably the easiest way is probably to use the term, it's an umbrella term. However, we live in Northern Ireland, there's a lot of rain. We get it all the time. And so you don't go too far without an umbrella or without a coat. And an umbrella is something that's very useful because lots of people do get under it and you can keep it nice and dry from the rain. And really this idea of safeguarding, underneath the idea of it, is that everything that's about keeping children and young people, and maybe vulnerable adults, safe. So it's about safety, and it's also about preventing harm. And we're thinking a moment ago about why we do that. Look, Genesis 1:27. Each one created in the image of God. They're little image bearers of God. It's for these little ones that Christ died. That they may be rescued from their sin, and that they can come to know Almighty God and Father as their Father. And so as we work with them, we want to make sure we're doing everything to keep them safe. Now, what we do aligns with the Word of God, but it also aligns as well with what legally we have to do as well. Now, from our perspective, what we're saying is the personal dignity and rights of all children in the United. And that's regardless of the child's circumstances. So it doesn't matter about their age, doesn't matter about their disability, doesn't matter about their gender, their racial heritage, their religious beliefs, their sexual orientation, their identity. We believe every individual deserves to be protected. Why? It's Genesis 1:27. Created in the image of God. It's simple. And so, as we begin to think about how Bible is used right across the world, used in lots of different cultures, we're very clear that we, along with our partners, want to make sure that all young people and adults are treated with respect, that we listen to, and that we protect with many types of abuse. Now, that word abuse, it's interesting because different contexts people maybe have a different idea of what's abuse, but in China is abuse. And so what we're going to look at this morning is 5 different categories of abuse, just that we understand, that we know what we're looking for, and that we're aware that these definitions are universal and right across the world. They're agreed right across the countries. So the first idea is physical abuse. You see it where perhaps a child is hurt, is damaged in some way, and it hasn't been an accident. So it's not that if somebody's tripped over something and fallen and hurt themselves. That's not physical abuse. Physical abuse is where it's the actions of another person that cause some harm to the other individual. And you'll maybe see that with music. You might see that with cuts, with burns, with broken bones. And the reality is that we're going to see this in statistics later on in the training. But actually, a lot of individuals have life-altering consequences as a result of having been abused. Life changes because of what happens and the impact of another person. Sexual abuse is something that we've become very aware of in recent years. It's talked a lot more about in the media. It's reported more than it's ever been. And this is where a child or young person is forced or enticed to be involved in some sort of sexual activity by another person. Are you aware of that? There's that emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is where that child is treated in a different way, maltreated. And that is an emotional abuse that perhaps scares or humiliates or isolates the individual. And that's something we need to be aware watching out for. Then there's that exploitation. Exploitation is where a child or young person is forced or coerced to do something, and someone else is gaining from it. So they're going to need to do something so that someone else gains from what they're doing. And linked to that, we then get this sexual exploitation. Perhaps someone is a power over a child or another adult, and they're forced to do something sexually that then there may be abuse to the other person. And you'll often see a difference here where there might be a difference in age, there might be a difference in gender, there might be a difference in intellect, there might be a difference in strength and money or resources. And these are things that we need to be aware of because they do happen around us. And the sad reality is these things can end up happening in our churches and in our ministries. So we need to be aware of it. We need to be aware of what we're looking for, and we need to be ready to act when we become aware of it. So what is our role as BES? Our role is two things. First of all, investigating. So if, when our materials are being used, there is an issue, or perhaps someone is being abused, that's something that we as BES would ask you to bring it to our attention. It's not to say if we bring it to our attention, it's not like we're going to say you don't get any more out of it. That's not how it works. We simply need to be aware of it so that we can report that it's happening and report when it's been dealt with properly. That's all it is. It's having that trail saying, this has happened, it was wrong, shouldn't have happened, and this was the outcome. And then what we'll do is we'll signpost you to help. We'll point you in the direction of others that might be a help to you in what you're involved in being able to sort out the issue that's presented to you. And this is why we have to do it, because we are required to take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical or mental violence. So today, if you like, is the educational measures. It's just at the start of our training today, saying that all of you that are here involved with children and young people are saying, we need to be aware of this. We need to be watching out, and we need to take care of how our programs are run. This is now where we begin to get a little bit more practical. Now, one of the things I should have said at the start of the training, just pause for a moment. I am noticing that lots of people taking notes, which is great. Feel free to continue to take notes. If you have given us your email address, everything that goes up there will be emailed to you later. Okay? It saves you getting sore hands. Okay? If there's something particularly that you teach there and you don't want to write it out, work away. If you still want to take notes, that's fine as well. But if you give us your email address, everything that we share today, it'll be sent to you later on, along with some really useful website links as well. You can go and find other resources that can be helpful as well. So later on tonight, or maybe sometime at the start of next week, we'll be emailing that out to you. We'll be able to get everything that we see here today. So, practical lens. Let's get started in a minute with this. This is where perhaps you're UK because you're involved in the leadership of some of the programs that are using Bibles now. You're working with children and young people on an ongoing basis, perhaps a weekly basis. I'm going to suggest some things for you that you can take away and that you can put in practice in your program. And the idea behind this is that you're protecting yourself. You're protecting the ministry. You're going to protect the church's name by being able to put very simple things in place that just prevent harm. And even prevent someone pointing the finger and saying, see what's happening there, that shouldn't happen. So there will be things here that we're going to think about that you can take and put back into your programs just to keep everybody safe, keep the children safe, but also to keep the adults safe if someone pointing the finger and saying, this happened, and maybe it didn't. So it's being safe in all those ways. So first of all, here's some good things to do. If you're working with children and young people, don't do it alone. Do it in groups. Even if you've got a Sunday school class, if you've got people, put two adults with the burden. It's a lovely way of making sure that actually you share the burden of the work. But also, it's another adult that is there as a witness to everything that's happening. It just makes good sense because if an issue that happens there is said to happen, you've got someone else there. You can say either yes, it did happen, or can say, well, no, it didn't happen. The other thing that we need to be able to do is to record what we do with children. So if children are coming to our programs, really we should be keeping records of their attendance in our programs. Because later on, if someone comes back and says, on this day something happened to me, you're able to check back in your records, and you're able to say, well, actually, you weren't there that day. A very simple thing to do, and yet something that can be so effective in keeping people safe. Caring physical contact is avoided. Now, this sounds strange. Let me share the context with you. So, my background is education. I was involved in leadership in school, a large school in inner city Belfast. Lots of different issues and problems that I've been dealing with each day. And lots of children actually who suffered many different forms of abuse. At the hands of family members or indeed of others. And part of that meant that you would be working alongside very vulnerable children and young people. Young people who had very different experiences in life. And because you were there, alongside them, being able to help them, there was a bond with you. So it would have meant if I was walking through the school, some of those children would have come running. And you would see them, they would come running, they were happy to see you. And perhaps they would come and they would put their arms around you. Think, what are you doing with that? What does that look like? And for me, I was uncomfortable with that on that. I'm there in this school environment, all these children around. How do we deal with it? And so we would see this happening quite a bit in the school that we were in. And what we were saying is that we need to be careful. Because what does it look like to other people? And so what we trained our staff to do was to manage that situation slightly better. And what we encouraged staff to do was, if a child would run to you to hug you, you would see them coming, what we would tend to have done would be to turn 90 degrees. And in effect, the child then comes and reaches you in this direction, and they hug you from the side. You then put your hand on their shoulder, and you're able to give them the care and comfort that they're looking for. Because you're balancing, you don't want, if a child has very difficult experiences, are developing this positive relationship with you, you don't want to be pushing the child away and say, I can't have that. That'll impact their little hearts. But on the other side of things, we need to be careful as to what it looks like. So very simply by managing the situation, by turning 90 degrees and giving the hug, the child gets the emotional comfort. But actually, it's very clear that there's nothing inappropriate between me and the child. You might be sitting this morning and thinking, really? Is that what we should be doing? Well, what I would say to you is, by implementing something so simple as that, very, very simple, just means that you know that no one can point a finger and say, something wrong happened there. And protecting yourself when you're working with children is a big priority. Protecting the children also is a priority. And so by putting something so simple in place like that, just enables things perhaps to develop in a way where there's a culture where people are thinking a bit deeper about what they're doing with children and why they're doing it. So if you're involved in a leadership role, that's something you can be thinking about. Games, children love games, we know that. Getting them involved in the games is great. But what we would always say is be careful about how you do that. Particularly if you're working with mixed groups of children, older teenagers with younger children. We just need to be careful there. Splitting the children up according to their age or stage of development is a much better way. Where younger children are playing together and older children are playing together. And we as the adults, but we're involved in facilitating it and making it how we should be the ones involved in the activity. Because again, what does it look like? What does someone see happen? Do they see us touching? And could someone actually point to that was inappropriate? What's the impact of that happen to me? What's the impact on the ministry that I'm involved in? Control and discipline. How we manage the group of children, that's another important thing to think through. We don't want to be involved as you're physically chastising the children. Because there are much better ways of managing the groups of children that we're working with. You know, when you see someone who's a good rapport with children up in front of them, my goodness, it's wonderful to watch, isn't it? To see someone who's there, who's got the children's attention, and where the children are just waiting for what happens next. That's what we're wanting to see as a culture developing how we work with children. We're wanting it to be engaging. Because oftentimes you'll see discipline problems with children when actually it's just boring. Have you been there? Do you remember what it's like to be sitting in kids' programs and there's no other way to put it? You were just bored. And so because it wasn't engaging, you had to make your own fun. You had to make some way of engagement, and that's what children will do. Children are made to do that, that's what they do. So for us in our programs, we come well prepared. And actually that's part of the discipline. We'll have a lot less discipline to deal with if we come prepared, ready for what's happening, and we know what our structured program is going to be looking like. The last point goes as a key point. We're not only setting out to harm any of our children. That's the culture of our program. That's what we want people to very clearly see. Let me touch on another area, gifts and rewards. And you might think this is strange, but I'm going to explain to you why we focus on this. If you're deciding you're going to reward the children, as a group you're working with the children, agree how the children get their rewards. And then stick to it. Don't let people go off to the side and decide, oh, I'm going to reward that child for some other reason. No, have the clear way of the child receiving the reward of the gift, where they know, where the adults know, and where there can be nobody pointing the finger and saying, that's favoritism. Because actually the other thing with different forms of abuse, we have become aware that actually sometimes gifts can be used to develop deeper friendships, to isolate children from others, and actually a child can end up eventually being abused if resources are being used in that way. And the safest way to prevent it from happening is to organise how we do our gifts, how we do our rewards, that we know how they're implemented and everybody keeps the same script. Photographs. It's wonderful to see photographs of children young people. I got to show you some at the start today. So if the children are engaged in Bible time, it's a wonderful thing, particularly for members perhaps of our church fellowships who are not able to attend those programs. For us, even in a prayer meeting, perhaps we will put a picture up of the children, a group of children, and say, let's pray for these little ones. The photograph is amazing for that sort of thing. But we do need to be careful as to how we use them. We're not going to be taking pictures of individual children on their own. Because again, what could someone could be pointing the finger there and say, well, actually that's not appropriate. So we don't take pictures of individual children. The other thing we don't do is maybe you've got a website or maybe you've got something on Facebook or you use some sort of social media and you can be posting pictures. Please do not post pictures of children along with their names. I'm going to give you a story, true story, of when I worked in a school where a child's picture, a child was holding up a certificate, and on the certificate in very small writing was the name of the child. There it was, just in front of the little piece of paper, the child was holding it up. And someone was on the Facebook page. Someone saw the picture, someone was able to zoom in to find out the name. And that individual didn't know the child, but because they knew what the child looked like, because they knew the child's name, they were able to wait for the child and introduce themselves. And when they introduced themselves, the child looked for a moment and thought, what is this person doing? And for a moment or two, that child was wondering, why is this person here? And that's what we enable. We enable, if we send out pictures of names, we enable people to come along and introduce themselves. That is one way of adults getting the trust of the child. And I think we need to use the child's name. So we don't want to be in that position where we're enabling others to be able to get in contact with children where they shouldn't have it. Whatever you use pictures, we should be getting consent from the parents. The parents say, listen, I'm happy for the child to come to your program, and I'm happy for the pictures to be taken and to be shared in group. So that you take that consent first of all. The other thing when we talk about social media is that children love to find adults on social media. If you're their Sunday school teacher and they're on some form of social media, if they see your picture, they see your name, you can be rest assured you're going to get a friend request. They want to be your friends. They want to find out more about you. They want to know what's going on in your life. They want you to know what's going on in their lives. It's not good. It blurs the whole boundary there. And again, it means that some people could point the finger and say, that's not appropriate. So again, for our own safety, for the protection of our ministries, it's something we'd say, don't do it. It just protects you and protects the children as well. When you do use social media, I know that in our home fellowship in Belfast, we have a WhatsApp group for all of the young people in the assembly. And what we do there is all of them are in one WhatsApp group, and there are 3 different adults that are also in the same WhatsApp group. So any contact between them, well, there's 3 adults who are seeing what's going on. It's just thinking it through, putting it in place to keep everybody safe. And it means that if anything is inappropriate, well, somebody needs it. Someone can bring it to our attention. So it's thinking these things through. Okay, let's think through what we do when a child comes and tells us that they have been abused. I've had this happen to me a number of times where a child has come to explain what something has happened to them. I think of one little girl in particular. A little girl who stopped me one day in the school and began to tell me a story about what she had experienced. And honestly, when I was listening to it, in my heart of hearts I was thinking, can this really be true? To me it sounded a bit far-fetched. But I listened. I assured the child that they were doing the right thing telling me. I didn't force them to tell me anymore. I just listened to what they wanted to share. And after, I sat down with another member of staff at the school afterwards and explained what happened and something through. We ended up that day involving police and social services because of what the child told us. The police that evening did a raid on the child's house. They knocked the door in and they went in, and the circumstances of what the child had been telling us, what they were able to see within the house, made a very compelling story. That ended up going to court, and that individual ended up being found guilty of abusing the child. It was significant. It was horrific to listen to. But the child had to be listened to. We had to deal with it. Because here's the reality. Imagine it for a moment. Imagine that day if I had sat and listened to that child and thought, can't be true. Good now. Dismiss it. Imagine if that child went on to continue to experience that abuse for years. Imagine that child came back to me at the age of 17 or 18 and said to me, Stevie, I told you that this was happening to me. You did nothing to protect me. Can you imagine that? That feeling. To have been in a position where I could have done the right thing and for whatever reason didn't do it. Brothers and sisters, you have got to protect the little ones. And if they come to share with us that something has happened, we listen to them, we record it, and we do what needs to be done. It's not easy. It's difficult. I remember having to do it first and actually be able to stand in a witness box and be able to say what happened, how the child portrayed what they said, how the child would share it. It wasn't easy. But it preserved the child and being harmed further in the days that followed. So we need to have a process in place. If a child comes and reports something, as churches, as ministries, we've got to know what we do about it. We've got to know how we record it, and we've got to know how we pass that on. You're not going to be involved in investigating it. Your job's not to go and to knock on the door and ask the person,